Sup, welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I am Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some more RPG horror stories. Apologies for not uploading as often lately. Last week has been a little bit chaotic, and honestly, I did not have time for anything. Seriously, I had to deal with a car-related thing, and then air conditioner-related thing, and then the house-related thing, and oh my god, so many inspections, so many things to take care of. Life got hella busy, but I'm free now, so we're gonna get back to some RPG horror stories for today. Let's start with the first one for today. When the newbie DM takes bad DMing jokes seriously. By the way, this is from the Gambling Jester, which created one of the most incredible pieces of art I've ever seen. Feast your eyes on this. Look at this. Look how incredible and amazing this looks. Links to the social media of their Instagram is right here, so make sure to check them out, click on them, see their stuff. They actually make some incredible things. For real, I am floored with how good that looks. The line work, the colors, the bloom. It looks incredible. I still don't really know how to feel about getting fan art because I don't feel like I deserve of anything be produced for me. Like, I'm just a lone tiefling on the internet that talks about dumb stuff and RPG horror stories and gives away his dumb opinions. So for me to receive something like this is just mind-blowing. Thank you so much, Jester. Thank you so much. That is really kind of you. But anyway, enough gushing. Let's get to your RPG horror story and check it out. Sup, Morrow? Long-time listener, first-time writer here. I wrote a small part of the story in a YouTube comment you replied to, and I thought about spilling the whole story. English is not my native language, so sorry if I mess up. To the DM's defense, he was a first-time DM. However, he was a player for about a year and a half, and I sort of expected him to pick up on the stuff we discussed every once in a while since we had different talks about how to avoid a railroad and unfair DMing and giving tips to each other on how to improve and the right balance between player agency and reasonable consequences. We all avoid new DMs at some point. It is a little bit difficult. Like, you see the DM do the stuff and you think, man, that looks so fun. I bet I can do it. And then you realize that it takes a little bit of work and not everybody is able to get a hang of it. But as you said, you already had a lot of talks about this whole thing, and it seems like situation just didn't improve, mainly because the guy potentially didn't listen, or maybe he thought better. Who knows? Let's keep reading. I was the forever DM for the first half of the time we played. Having a wizard DM a long and beautiful campaign for the second half of it, we usually made jokes about it like, yeah, no, tomorrow it's gonna be a TPK, or you take 50 to 100 damage for trying to play the game, or I'm the DM, so now the story changes, and silly stuff like that. Of course, these were just dumb jokes that we made out of game and never acted on when DMing. Knowing this player was a bit of a that guy when we proposed to DM for a short campaign, I started to remember him multiple times that when we were saying this stuff we said as a joke and not to take it as an actual example. We also gave him some DM tips since he was DMing for the first time, explaining how giving exposition to NPCs isn't bad but should be balanced, so it's not just the party going around watching the epic guys do stuff. Not because I think he is dumb, but because seeing his past behavior, I know he would pull some wacky stuff on us, and I wanted to clarify that it would not be okay. Considering that I'm here writing the story, you can imagine exactly how it went. It is also important to note that we are role-playing in text chat, so when we discuss things out of character, everyone can read them unless you use the /W command on Roll20. With that said, I want to make a clear thing that intent of the story is not to criticize any DM's bad writing or discourage any D&D players to try to DM. The problems listed in the story are mostly things that in this group were already discussed to death and an opportunity for anyone to take advice from. I like that perspective. I think more players should learn how to DM in D&D and stuff, or any TTRPG that you play. Pathfinder, Starfinder, Call of Cthulhu, whatever you like. DMing or GMing is really fun, and I think it gives player insight on what it takes to DM or GM and how DMing GMing changes the perspective for the game itself in general. Sitting at the DM seat really broadens your experience to really understand what it takes to DM as a whole. So passing down information knowledge like this is honestly, I think, is a good thing. But either way, let's go ahead and continue with the story. I will admit that I sort of min-maxed my character when I made her for this game. I'm usually for lower than average stats, but when I feel the DM would use shady tricks on me, I just feel the need to avoid dying in dumb ways. It was meant to be a short campaign where a suspiciously rich necromancer hired us to find the long lost sword of an ancient emperor, which the necromancer had resurrected to recognize said sword once we went back to the market in the capital. So they had this weird caged head of some old undead guy. Sounds like a cool simple concept, so we bring out characters. So we start our little journey as a level 7 party, consisting of an arcane trickster elf, me, a human warlock who sometimes gets visions from the goddess of destiny, and Modron wizard, yeah, a funny little round guy. the fantasy equivalent of a computer with an access to the internet. A tiefling eldritch knight, abbreviated to knight for the rest of this story, the necromancer NPC, and his undead old dude. Not talk about the old emperor whose head is traveling with us. He was fine except for two simple issues. 1. He was extremely racist. 2. He would simply not shut up. Don't get me wrong, I believe that racism in D&D can be a really interesting thing to implement in a campaign if treated with sensibility and everyone is on board with it, and in this case we actually were fine with having racism towards fantasy races. But the way it was implemented in this game specifically was just painfully annoying, always dropping the recurring one joke whose punchline was "elves bad," the only variance of it being one where it was mentioned that there were slaves usually hunted for sport, and the other having two guys wondering what my character's ears would taste like once roasted, along with Knight's tail since he was a tiefling. I would understand some racism by him because he was an emperor from centuries ago. Would make sense that he was extremely backwards, but literally almost every time I or Knight talk, he would go on a racist rant about how the empire is not like before, how he wants slavery back and stuff. It simply got repetitive to the point that my character stopped answering his rants and started joking charge extra gold for the quest for every racist insult that rotten head yelled at us. Something that a friend of mine from VR Chat roleplay group said is conflict is story, and I agree. Sometimes a little bit of fantasy racism, especially if people are cool with it at a table, can be fun. But let me make myself clear, I'm not sitting here cheering, "Whoa, racism!" I think that everything that you're putting into your D&D game or whichever TTRPG you're playing should be part of a story. It should be story driven, story motivated, and everything is part of a narrative conclusion and continuation rather than racism just because. Because racism just because is annoying, gratuitous, and just completely unnecessary. If it's just there just to rip on somebody, it's not fun. DMs should only be adding stuff that actually will matter in the story and have some sort of character progression, stuff like that. If it's just put in just for the sake of putting it in, just so DM can have the little kicks and ha 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 hee hee hoo hoo, racism guys, hee hee ha ha, then no, it's just not gonna be fun. It's gonna be annoying. Like the players in this story are getting annoyed because the guy just saying, "It wasn't like the same before, we need to bring slavery back." It's just, okay, yeah, that's the same thing you said 700 times, man. Get a new fucking line. The days of travel were mostly uneventful. Fair, travel in D&D isn't that great. Also, this wasn't a premise of the game, so it was fine. Well, the racist had usually taken the talk most of the time, even when the party was just minding their business or talking to each other. At night, when we took turns, some random guy would either walk to us to talk in the middle of the night for no particular reason, or we would overhear conversation from NPCs who set up camps, which is a nice fun encounter once in a while. Except that this would become basically the whole game until we reached a bridge that crossed the canyon. We had to go the long way since we had the necromancer's wagon with us, and the bridge was just wide enough to be crossed on foot. Warlock had a vision where it tells us the necromancer and emperor need to cross the bridge while the rest of us had to bring his stuff down the canyon. So we go, bringing the necromancer's wagon and his donkey with us, keeping our guard high in a foggy canyon, expecting a fight. One of the bigger issues came up when we faced the first fight. We were exploring this canyon, and we explicitly said that we are walking slow and silent while keeping our eyes and ears open and alert to make sure nothing would surprise us from the fog that surrounds us. The wizard even sent their familiar to scout ahead for us so nothing would come of us. Of course, none of this mattered. We get a round of surprise anyway? Why? Because I thought it was cool. Yeah, sure. It was really cool for us to know that we took all the precautions in order to not get showered by arrows and discovered that it was completely useless. But it wasn't. You wanna know why? Because the DM later admitted that he would get double damage for the surprise round had we not been paranoid about enemies. By the way, we get arrows. I get nothing because of that one rogue privilege. I think it's uncanny dodge in English, I don't know. And we are thrown into a ridiculous fight. Details are hazy, but basically he threw around 5 to 6 skeleton minotaurs that he homebrewed to give them some ability where we could throw 4d6 of fire damage at us. Half if you pass the save, plus like 3 or 4 shadows. And this is where he just drops a random homebrew combat rule that we never used before, stating that if the enemy's crit, the damage is doubled. This also applies if we have a nat 1 on and saving throw against that one ability I described before. Notice how in the story it doesn't say that players get double damage. Yeah, because that's a bullshit rule. Don't put in bullshit rules out of nowhere, and at least, the least you could do, DM, is make it fair. If the enemies could do double damage on a crit, players should be able to do so as well. Warlock goes down. Wizard and Knight almost go down. I'm the only one who is managing to stay alive because of my class privilege and a fat dex stat, until the boss throws a fireball to the wagon and the donkey we're escorting down the canyon. Reasonably, we ask how messed up we are now that the belongings of our boss are destroyed, to which the DM says, nah, the donkey is fine. The wagon is perfectly intact. Reasonably, the almost dead party decides to not question it, to take cover behind it so they could, not die, burn alive, or there's a perfect place that is clearly capable to protect us from the fire. The DM did not like that. In fact, when he brought the final boss, an even bigger Minotaur skeleton, also homebrewed to throw fire at us, Knight used some ice spell, don't remember the name, and the boss had a natural 20 on a save. The DM rules that the skeleton takes no damage and throws it back at you, leaving Knight with 2 hit points. He either doesn't like you guys or he just really wants to win. I'm assuming the DM really wants to win this. The DM sees this encounter as not him playing with his friends at a D&D game that he's running. He's seeing it as you guys are the opposition, you are the enemy, and his precious NPCs, his minotaurs and skeletons or what have you, favorite special characters that he gotta protect. So in order to protect them, he has to destroy your characters. I don't like DMs that do that sort of thing, where they just want to find a weird way to turn nonsense around. You know what I've seen before? I've seen some monk NPC BBEG bad guy literally take the psychic lance spell that a wizard flung at him, somehow use deflect missile from the monk feature to catch it in the air and throw it back at the wizard. Do you know how insane that sounds? He literally just took an ability that doesn't make sense to use and used it in the most stupidest, insane way possible. He actually said of how he can do it. Deflect missile from the monk feature lets him do that. No, it does not, DM. It does not. That sounds nonsensical. Why do you hate your players so much? The session ends with Warlock on death safe, Wizard with 6 HP, Knight with 2, and me being the only one who isn't half dead. We have a talk about the random rule that was dropped on us mid-fight and about the fact that it was broken, and most likely we have us TPK'd, which is what it was going to since 2 of us had a few HP from going down and 1 of us already was. His reason was simply, I don't know man, I thought it'd be funny and cool to surprise you. After having each player explain why it wasn't okay to drop random rules mid-game, he decided to not use it anymore. We also discuss about the fact that our efforts to be vigilant towards possible enemies were rendered useless by the fact that he still gave the enemies a surprise round, regardless of what we did, to which was the same reasoning, I thought it looked cool. Combat resumes on the next session. Knight and I realized that the boss is probably almost dead and decided to be a collab kill regardless of who gets it, because we thought it looked cool and would create a cool dynamic between our characters. Though we were reluctant to work together at first, our idea was that they were sort of rivals turning slowly into allies and then maybe friends. We discussed this out of character between combat turns and we were kinda hyped with the idea of it. Shortly after the exchange between me and the Knight, the DM decides that the boss kills himself, exploding after stabbing his own bones with his own sword. Because it was cool. Makes no sense. This is not even a rule of cool. This is a rule of nonsense. Why is he suddenly trying to dominate the players, but then when you guys try to take the enemy down, he just decided, oh, nice sword. I am dead. Kaboom. Because it looked cool. I mean, I guess it probably was cool in the DM's head, but it's not cool to the players because suddenly this insurmountable foe that's trying to really kill him, really trying to burn him down, just goes, okay, I'm done skiing. And that's it. To the players, it just looks like, why were we attacked in the first place? What was the point of a DM? Why were we in this combat in the first place? What was the point of running this? It just makes things pointless, dude. It makes things pointless and have no weight whatsoever. Why did the DM do this? At this point, I was firmly convinced that this whole point was to outcool us in every way, which is fine once in a while with some NPCs, but this was just kind of meh. And we swallow our hopes of having a cool collab character moment and move on to something that no amount of D&D horror stories could prepare me for. The DM proceeds with a scene, saying that the skeletons were a test for us and the big bony hand of a giant lifts us up in the air. And boys, this giant skeleton brings us into a 2-session-long cutscene. 2-session-long cutscene? You gotta be kidding me. Where the DM keeps reminding us how we were incapable to move, as the giant tells us about his world back then, and how one day he'll destroy everything to bring it back, if we bring back his sword to him. So yeah, I do understand that it gives us some insight into the sword we're looking for and the fact that it is dangerous, But 2 sessions? That could be wrapped up in like 10-20 minutes at most. You didn't have to have 2 sessions. Well, to put in ballpark, right? A session, I believe, is about on average 4 hours, depending on your group, but I think it's about 4 hours. It's 4 hours definitely 100% for me, but I think most sessions are about 4 hours anyway. But either way, imagine 8 hours for 2 sessions of a cutscene. That would actually drive me literally mad. I have nothing against a good lore dump. I love them. But if our characters aren't supposed to even move a finger for all that time, maybe just write it by yourself and drop it in our group chat to tell us we need to read it before the next session. Like, what's the point to wait for us all to schedule a session where we have 0 input? Cutscene ran aside, our party, not wanting to randomly end the world, refuses. The DM then says, "So you fall asleep to his magic." Me, playing an elf, I simply point out that, and he goes like, "I don't know, man, he's better magic." I get that he's a first-time DM and that honestly this is a bit nitpicky, but really? The DM said that he didn't like the fact that my character wasn't active enough during the cutscene. In all honesty, the heck was I supposed to do? Oh, I'm sorry, DM. I thought you paralyzed the entire party so they couldn't do anything for the cutscene because they couldn't move whatsoever. What do you want them to do? Move around? Oh, wait a minute. You made that enable to do those. So they literally just have to sit there and watch your cutscene, DM. How do you want them to be active and more interactive in your cutscene when you don't give them any sort of initiative or reason to, or give them some sort of agency to be interactive in your freaking cutscene if they can't move whatsoever? Okay, let me slow down a little bit. First of all, elves have a magical affinity to not being able to be put down by magical sleep. If the DM ignores that completely, then what's the point of playing an elf? It's like me, Morrow, playing a tiefling, and I have a Devil's Sight as one of my warlock invocations. Lets me see 120 feet through magical and non-magical darkness, and then suddenly I can't see past 5 feet within my face. It would completely take away any sort of point of me playing the character, because what's the point of having the ability to do the thing that I can do? And same thing with elves. They can't be put asleep magically. They just can't do that. A lot of fake creatures have very unique special quirks that make them what they are. If the DM completely ignores it, then what's the point of picking that selection and in the first place? Just make everybody play human at that point. Might as well. The rest of the traveling goes smooth enough. We discuss about the new knowledge and the fact that we don't want to end the world. We need to find cover into a cave because it rains. Some other NPCs get in with us and we'll randomly talk about stuff. Some guy drops some exposition about the black market of the city along with other organized crime stuff, which is a nice piece. Then he starts explaining the concept of organized crime to our characters like we are 5, which I wouldn't even mind if it wasn't for the fact that it's honestly just a waste of time for stuff that might actually be new knowledge. Skip to when we finally arrive to the capital. We get to a tavern and have some chatter at the dining table before we go to sleep. We discuss stuff about what to do tomorrow, and it somehow goes about a convo on which character is older. I don't remember how. Mine is like a century and a half old, so she's like, "I'm probably the oldest except for the head." And the necromancer laughs at it, to which I ask how old he is, and he just doubles up pay to not answer the question. This is where I had the 5 best sessions of this whole game. Spoiler, sadly, nothing of it mattered. So I didn't confront the necromancer because to previous knowledge, he is after the same sword that could revive a giant who wants to end the world. And not knowing the rest of the party stands on it, I keep quiet for a while. I waited for the necromancer to go to sleep, and then I went to talk to Wizard in private using his race feed. He knows most history facts and had a lot of knowledge about things that happened in the last 10 years. To gather knowledge about this guy, my research reveals that he was the son of a wealthy family of merchants who almost died one day, and from that day he just went off with all his money, looking for a sword. Of course, this is an extremely worrying matter because for all we know, he could bring it to the giant. So I decided to organize a party meeting early in the morning. The night passes. Wake the rest of the party up. Wizard places his familiar above the door in the necromancer's bedroom. This will be relevant. And I informed the rest of the party about the various possibilities of what this guy might want to do with the sword and if 800 gold is really worth the end of the road. And while he could pay us even more, if we have nowhere to spend it on, it would be kinda useless for us. We really felt like we were onto something, examining past conversations we had with them, remembering reactions, and overall trying to figure out if it was safe or not to continue the quest. To which we start considering breaking into his wagon to check his stuff, to which the Emperor says, "Oh yeah, good luck getting the key out of his neck." To which I say that I can still pick the lock, but it'll take me some time, so I might have to do it at night when he isn't there. Or plan distraction with the rest of the party. Sadly, we can't keep talking or act or picking the lock because time is almost up. Wizard says he's going to wake the necromancer up, to which the DM says, "When you go, you don't find him in his room. He probably went already down." To which Wizard remembers that if that happened, he would know since he literally left his familiar above his door. So DM retcons what he said and goes, "Yeah, he just woke up. We end the session there and DM says, "Oh, by the way, I wasn't planning on having Necromancer spying on you guys when I said he wasn't in his room. I have no proof to back up my belief, but I sincerely think that's BS, and that he totally was about to do that, having not reminded him that we had a familiar, but I brush it off because for the first time, we had a funny session where the party engaged with each other to discuss what it means to complete the quest rather than blindly follow it. And I genuinely think this was a really nice plot point that made us sit back and think about it. Sadly, we weren't supposed to do that. Imagine you have a party of players that just really want to get engaged in the story and they finally get a hook. They sink their teeth, the metaphorical teeth, into what you got going on. And you have this opportunity to play off of what your party's planning, what they're plotting, what they're thinking, and take the story to some great heights. And instead you go as a DM, as this DM probably will, and ruin that. You turn the tables. Tables have turned. And it's just really sad when DMs miss this golden goose opportunity to get the players involved. They're already interested, man. They're interested in this thing. Play off with it. It's not going to take you much. Just incorporate them into the story and make them feel involved in this thing. That's all the players want to do. They get interested in something, that find a way to get interested in your world and stuff. Anyway, sorry, let's get back to the story. Sorry for this tangent. It's just, I am passionate about this story. I'm passionate about what's going on here. While Wizard is going to get the Necromancer, me and Knight start acting some petty arguing, both for silly roleplay moments and to make the Necromancer think that we're sort of too busy being mad at each other to actually be plotting against him, which made sense since me and Knight had some bitter moments in the past, so it didn't feel too much out of place from the Necromancer's POV. Necromancer arrives, stops us from bickering, and we go to the black market. When we don't find the sword, we'll find some dude who can arrange a meeting with the guy who has it. We agree, and then they tell us it's going to be this afternoon, a few hours from now. We'll go back to the tavern and have lunch. Then Necromancer decides he's going to have a nap. Not in his room in tavern, but in his wagon. And we go, okay, weird. That's an old man decides to inflict more discomfort on himself. He might not be having a nap. My character goes out just take a look to see where the Necromancer keeps his key for the lock. As he approaches the wagon, and DM goes, "No, you too far to see." Then he proceeds to tell me that I hear clearly his donkey yawn, to which I say, so I'm too far to see him unlock the door, but not too far to hear a donkey yawn in the busy street? And he goes, "It's a strong yawn." To which I honestly just say, yeah, nah, that's too easy. And he argues, come on, he could be asleep, and the door's unlocked. Now, only a madman would take a nap in an open wagon near a busy street without locking it, but I decided to take the bait. Knocking on the door softly, and surprise, surprise, he's wide awake. So I come up with a dumb lie on the spot, saying something about us having seconds, so you're gonna pay extra for our food. He was paying for our stuff since we work for him, so yeah. What pissed me off was not the fact that it was hard to actually gather more info about the Necromancer, but the fact that the DM was clearly subjective in his description, trying to trick me into making a dumb choice so the Necromancer could have a reason to not trust my character. We wait our time while having some more discussion about how to get into the wagon without him noticing us, while casually glancing at the door. So he couldn't just appear at our table and say he knows everything until time is up and we have to go to the Mafia orc guy to possibly buy the sword. We arrive and the orc receives us, talking about how he wants to know us a bit more and why he wants a sword. The Necromancer says he is a collectionist, and I subtly go with my character asking about what he could tell me about the sword, mostly to hint to the orc that the Necromancer is full of BS, and that he should be careful about it, possibly being a scam, while not exposing myself too much, simply trying to gain a tiny bit more trust than our companion. The orc says he's willing to give it away if we participate at a gladiator show, to homage the fact that he was a gladiator when he was younger. I make a reasonable offer, saying that I'm willing to accept as long as the sword is given to the hands of one of the people who are going to fight, since the Necromancer expected us to throw our lives in the gladiator show and get the sword all for himself. I try to appeal to the fact that the orc was a gladiator, and if he really wants to homage his past self and the others who gamble their lives for hope and freedom, he should honor the ones who put the work in, simply because so we could have an advantage towards the Necromancer and we could interrogate him to make sure the sword won't be brought to the giant who wants to end the world. The DM did not like that. Necromancer goes mad as heck on me, saying that I was absolutely insane, which is reasonable from him since I was interfering with his plans. But then the orc goes like, no, not gonna do that, also because you and Knight aren't good fit for the arena. He then goes to explain how Wizard and Warlock are better, because it look less threatening, to which I argue that Iron Knight can do that as well. Just dress more casual clothes. It's not that hard. But he goes to say about how it's not the same because they actually are innocent looking since they're casters. Except the casters are well known as Empire, and people know that they can be as dangerous as melee classes, if not even more, by the way. The discussion goes in circles where the orc argues that the people in the arena aren't smart enough to pick up the concept of casters, but are completely fine with identifying a fighter or a rogue that is dressing in a casual outfit. If people want to watch a fight, they just want to watch a good fight. They don't care who fights. They really won't care. This is like WWE wrestling matches where reputations and roleplay on the wrestling ring matter. They just want to watch blood be spilled and a fun fight. That's all they want to see. And who wouldn't want to give them a fun fight except a rogue who is really talented with weapons and a fighter who is extremely talented with weapons? Come on! Before describing the rest, I'd like to admit that I'm far from proud of the way I reacted in this part. But to my defense, I was pissed off that the DM just expected me to accept this absolutely nonsensical logic about these folks' intuition. It was just weirdly selective. Also, the DM was basically just using the orc as a mouthpiece at this point because he just didn't care about the gladiator fights being an actual gladiator fight anymore. At some point, the DM just goes like, "Your plan fails. Also, the necromancer doesn't trust you, you know. Consequences." To which I honestly snap and say that he's railroading us and that he broke character because he knew things wouldn't go his way if the orc kept acting on his ideals and beliefs. And he goes, "Yeah, he's my character. I decide how he acts." And yes, while that is your job as a DM, we could all see that it was the DM speaking, not the orc. While I try to say that I believe that my plan wouldn't derail the campaign, it was also reasonable enough to at least not be caught by an automatic failure. After a bit of bickering, a discussion where he calls me a crazy bitch and decides to play the victim as if he didn't play dirty tricks on us. The DM admits that the real reason was because he simply wrote that scene to go exactly as planned. And just to be clear, I'm not mad at the fact that we had no choice. I'm mad at the fact that we spent 5 sessions of planning for nothing. Like, if the DM told us that we had no choice, I wouldn't even mind. I even told him and he said, "Yeah, but it would sound like I was railroading you." Yeah. Oh my god, the leap in logic is just insane here. If you know you're gonna railroad your players, at least have the courtesy to say so, that a railroad is coming up. The OP and the players aren't mad at this or railroad. Railroading is gonna happen eventually at some extension, at some capacity. They're mad that they were allowed, basically baited over, almost like led on in a way, in a sense. And what they led on, all I know is it feels bitter that the DM didn't communicate with them when they were plotting and trying stuff out, only for the DM just to say, "Nope, it doesn't work, sorry, it doesn't work because I planned it out one way and I didn't let you know ahead of time and stuff." The least you could do as a DM is, if you're plotting for some sort of a big explosive event, is to let the players know what is going on, even at capacity. Don't spoil it, but say, "Hey guys, I know you're really into planning stuff, but there's gonna be something coming up that may change the plans, so don't get into the plan ahead of time and everything. It's just let's see how it plays out first." I bet if the DM communicated more, the players would have an easier and better time and wouldn't feel so frustrated. I feel frustrated because this feels unfair. The next day we talked about it and he denied it, except that you can check Roll20's chat logs. We sort of solved it after the other players also made him notice his absolute lack of self-reflection, and he sort of apologized for calling me a crazy bee, saying he was stressed and stuff. I get that having the whole party start a plan to act on their own might be overwhelming for a first-time DM, but I would have just preferred that he told us to tone it down rather than letting us go free and slap an automatic failure at the end. Wanted to end this dumpster fire on a lighter note, so to all DMs new and experienced, I have an honest tip that comes from this story. If your party might be onto your insane plot twist, let them have a chance in uncovering it if they have a reasonable plan. It doesn't mean that your plot twist is weak, it means that your players paid attention to the details. Do not punish them for paying attention to your game and actively wanting to participate in it. Thanks for reading. Regardless of whether or not you decide to cover it or not, I decided to add a little fan art I made while I was sitting down this story. Hope you liked it. I did. But also, big thing with that last paragraph, the last comment, if your players are paying attention and they're onto the ploy of the BBG or whoever it is that's on there, if they are paying attention and they're plotting because they're engaged, work with them. If they are paying attention, they're actually interested in what you're writing, they're interested in putting together something that you're doing, they want to know what's going to happen, they want to be part of it. It's actually an important lesson. Like, I get sometimes we want to have a crazy cool plot twist, but if your players are genuinely invested that they're figuring out these plot twists and getting on with your story, getting hooked on everything going on and becoming part of the process, become part of the story, and they're genuinely interested, let them be part of the story, let them be part of the hook. They're interested, let them participate, let them be part of it, because it's a beautiful thing. It's better to participate than somebody just AFKs on the phone the whole time trying to, like, you know, pass the time because they don't care for the story or whatever's going on in your story. This is a lovely story to read. If you want to submit your own, email down description below for email story submissions. You feel free to do so. I try to check them kind of regularly now that I'm aware of how far behind I am. So yeah, and with that, that's going to be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.